Hello friends, my name is Kathy Lee Cornell and I serve as the Director for the Synod of the Sun Partnership for Disaster Recovery, also known as SPDR. This is our second video report for this year of events and activities across the 11 presbyteries within our Synod. So if you missed our first video, you can still find it in the Synod's website in the About Us section under the Disaster Recovery tab. For today, I'm going to cover a few major events, including Hurricane Beryl, this spring's tornado season, a flooding event in the panhandle of Oklahoma, ways you can get involved, volunteer, and be prepared for the rest of this hurricane season. The most recent disaster on our minds is, of course, Hurricane Beryl. Unfortunately, Hurricane Beryl impacted our friends in New Covenant Presbytery, which already experienced two previous events. The first was a widespread flooding event in early May when more than 21 inches of rain fell during a 5-day period. The second event happened just a few days later, beginning on the night of May 16th, known as the derecho. A system of straight-line winds traveled across the Gulf Coast from Texas to Florida, causing widespread damage, particularly around the city of Houston, and of course leaving at least 1 million residents without power. And finally, on July 8th, Hurricane Beryl made landfall near Matagorda, Texas, with a maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour. Beryl traveled across a good portion of our country, but for those in southeast Texas, nearly 3 million people were left without power during a time of excessive heat. Many of the fatalities attributed to Beryl were due to individuals who suffered a medical complication as a result of the heat and loss of electricity. So because of these compounding events, New Covenant Presbytery requested what is known as a National Response Team from Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, PDA. In just a few days' time, the PDA team visited with presbytery and congregational leaders, including 16 churches whose facilities were impacted by Beryl and the derecho. The presbytery has already been approved for a grant from PDA that will support churches in need of recovery from these storms. I want to lift up a collective sense of gratitude for presbyteries, churches, and individuals who have stepped up and answered the call to support all those impacted across Texas from these events. From mobilizing cleanup buckets and hygiene kits to becoming phone volunteers through crisis cleanup, those congregations who served as Red Cross shelters and hosted disaster relief groups, and especially the good people of Mo Ranch and the Woodlands Community Presbyterian Church for hauling a generator across the state to share with First Presbyterian Church in Bay City. Of course, we ask for your continued support and prayers as the recovery from this event and all others I'll highlight today will likely take years to complete. The other major disaster event I want to highlight is our very active tornado season we've witnessed across Oklahoma, Arkansas, and even North Texas and Louisiana this past spring. 2024 has been reported to be the most active tornado season since 2017 by the National Centers for Environmental Information database. I've listed here just a few of the communities we've checked in on and where these tornadoes have occurred in our synod. And I want to lift up our friends at the Presbytery of Arkansas for their work supporting two congregations impacted by the tornado outbreak that occurred on May 26th. First Presbyterian Church of Rogers and First Presbyterian Church of Bentonville. Both congregations sustained heavy damage to their buildings, impacting their capacity to hold worship, schools, and community outreach programs. But through their existing relationships with ministry partners and, of course, Ferncliff, both of these congregations were able to provide additional food pantry items, disaster kits, and supplies to their neighbors in the days after the tornadoes. In June, a different PDA National Response Team was deployed to visit with these churches, their staff, their leaders, as well as the presbytery, who's also supporting recovery efforts from tornadoes from last year. And PDA has also awarded grants to the presbytery in response to these storms. The last event I want to highlight may not have made the national news, but to Cimarron Presbytery and to First Presbyterian Church in Guymon, Oklahoma, the flooding event they experienced in June was a catastrophic 1,000-year flood, meaning there is a 1 in 1,000 chance a flood like this could occur in any given year. So in a 24-hour period in June, 7 to 10 inches of rain fell overnight on dry ground, resulting in flash flooding and power outages, affecting thousands of residents. And what's important to remember is that when events like these happen in smaller communities, federal assistance we're used to from FEMA, which is made to those from Hurricane Beryl and the tornadoes in Arkansas, is not available to communities like Guymon because they're smaller in size. And so we're grateful for the Presbytery and to PDA who have offered First Presbyterian Church in Guymon grants intended to go out and directly serve their neighbors in need from this event. Now that we've covered the events that have occurred over just the past 3 months, it should be no surprise that the need for volunteers is great. We are in this transitional phase in disasters where those immediate work relief groups are just starting to wind down their operations, and the need for long-term recovery groups and volunteers increases and will likely be sustained for years to come. So I want to invite you to please talk to your churches, your campus ministries, your book groups, your lunch bunches. Get people together and consider how you can form a team or sponsor and support a team. You can create disaster cleanup buckets and hygiene kits to replenish Ferncliff. There is no shortage of ways that volunteers like you can help thousands of residents whose homes have been damaged or destroyed. And there is no shortage of ways we are all invited to live out God's call to love our neighbors today. So you can reach out to PDA directly to find out ways you can volunteer, or please contact me to figure out how you can plug in with some of our smaller communities as well. And lastly, we are still in the midst of hurricane season, and as of the recording of this video, Hurricane Debbie is upon us. And so I want to highlight some resources we have for you. You can find our hurricane webinar recording on YouTube and on the Synod Sunspots podcast. An extensive list of preparedness resources can be found on our website under the blogs tab. I encourage all of you to take some time. Please take some time to make an emergency plan, gather critical supplies, check on your friends and neighbors, build and foster relationships now so that if and when a disaster strikes, our resiliency together will guide us towards our full recovery with the help of one another. Friends, thank you so much for taking this time to watch or listen and for sharing this SPDR August report. As always, you are invited to reach out to me if you have any questions or want to get more involved in our partnership. It is together that we help bear witness to the love and presence of Christ in all circumstances. So thank you again for your generosity, support, and especially for your continued prayers for our neighbors across the Synod of the Sun.